Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up in our news tonight. Human remains discovered in a late-night fire. 2 are dead following 2 traffic fatalities on Abaco. The South Beach MP calls on Bahamians to love thy neighbor when considering getting vaccinated. And the extended emergency orders not sitting well with a former member of parliament. Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Georgia Bain, topping news tonight. A man is dead following a structural fire at a home on Berkeley Street. Shortly after 9 Friday night, officers of the fire branch received reports of a fire on Berkeley Street at Westridge Park West.
The Fire Delta unit responded, and on their arrival they met a 2-story single structure engulfed in flames. The officers extinguished the fire, following which they conducted a sweep of the interior of the building, and as a result they found the body of a male in the upper portion in a bathroom, crouched in the bathtub, unresponsive.
According to Peters, officers discovered the body of an elderly man in a bathroom of the 2-story building.
EMS was called, and on their arrival, following the examination of the body, it was pronounced lifeless. He's in his late 50s, early 60s. At this time, we want to remind members of the public to ensure that they protect themselves against incidents such as these by ensuring that they don't sleep with cigarettes in their mouth, or lamps on, or any other electronic device that could possibly cause a fire in incidents like this.
And 2 men are dead following 2 separate traffic fatalities on Abaco. The first happening shortly before 10 Friday night. A gray BMW lost control on SC Boodle Highway, swerving into the eastbound lane and colliding with a gray Dodge Caravan. Officers having to use the jaws of life to remove the occupants of the BMW. The driver received leg injuries. However, the front seat passenger was pronounced dead on the scene. The female driver of the Caravan receiving serious injuries and is listed in stable condition. The second incident taking place shortly after 8 this morning on Cherokee Sound Highway, where the driver of a Suzuki Swift was attempting to overtake a vehicle and lost control, colliding into a utility pole. He was pronounced dead on the scene. And senior pastor of Zion Baptist Church South Beach, Bishop Wenneth Davis, has passed away on Friday evening. Davis was an educator and made his mark on the ministry of education before entering the church ministry. The leader of the Progressive Liberal Party extending condolences, stating that the church community has lost a great biblical scholar and a leader. The education community has lost a visionary, a teacher, and a strong advocate for education, and the Bahamas has lost a native son. Condolences are extended to his wife Ismay, their children, and his siblings, including Bishop Ross Davis and Apostle Lee Watson. Well, earlier this week, the Minister of Health charged that taking the COVID-19 vaccine is the moral thing to do. Although that statement didn't sit well with parliamentarians, one member of cabinet is coming to his defense. Our Berthany McDermott tells us more.
Education Minister Jeffrey Lloyd defending his cabinet colleague Runwood Wells, who told Parliament this week that taking the COVID-19 vaccine is the moral thing to do.
We have been confronted with and assaulted by a deadly enemy, an enemy that will kill you. And it is for the benefit of every member of a society that must live together and that must work together, that must educate together, that must play together, to play its honorable part in ensuring that that enemy does not create serious, devastating effects in our community.
On Wednesday, Health Minister Runwood Wells said getting vaccinated shows love of God and love of neighbor. Many have since taken issue with the comment, including Pine Ridge MP Frederick McAlpine, who questioned if Wells was suggesting that those who do not take the vaccine do not love God. Lloyd referred to scripture to support the claim that vaccination is an example of loving your neighbor as yourself.
The scripture calls for us to love our neighbor as ourselves. And what is the imposition? What is the imperative? and that is you will do what is best for the society as a whole. Certainly for yourself, but for the society as a whole. Therefore, you should not be running the red lights. Therefore, you should not be violating the laws. Therefore, you should be protecting yourself and ensuring that others are so protected.
More than 40,000 people have taken the vaccine in the Bahamas, which according to Wells represents about 10% of the Bahamian population. The South Beach MP stressed that the best way to protect yourself and family is by getting vaccinated and following COVID-19 protocols.
What is the best way to do that? By becoming vaccinated. What is another very important way to do that? By wearing the mask, by maintaining social distance, by not crowding, by washing your hands. That is the moral thing to do, because we are all our brothers' keepers, sisters' keepers. We are responsible together and individually for the harmonious and safe environment in which we live. So absolutely it's the moral thing to do.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
And Health Minister Renwood Wells is urging Bahamians to take the AstraZeneca vaccine that is currently available in country. According to AstraZeneca, the vaccine is 76% effective against symptomatic COVID-19 and 100% effective against severe disease and hospitalization. In studies and trials, AstraZeneca was 85% effective against symptomatic COVID-19 in those aged 65 and older. The health minister says he visited the United States recently and sees where their vaccine rollout has made the country more free to move around.
And I can tell you, just having left a couple of states in the United States, there are states where folks would have been aggressive in vaccinating their people, and there's no more masks, there's no more social distancing. You can walk into places, at least from the state side of the government, and they've left it up to private companies, restaurants, and universities to decide on how they want to proceed with protocols inside the environment. But as you would have known, I think some 70% of Americans have already gotten their first dose.
Anyone over the age of 18 is eligible to take the vaccine, which is administered in 2 doses. To make an appointment or find a center near you, visit bahamas.vax.bs. Meanwhile, despite a dip in reported COVID-19 cases in the region, the Pan American Health Organization is keeping a close eye on heightened COVID-related deaths in the region, especially in countries like the Bahamas.
Out of the 5 countries in the world with the highest numbers of new infections are in the Americas. And many Caribbean islands like the Bahamas, Haiti, and Trinidad and Tobago are seeing COVID deaths double in the last week. Canada has registered a tripling of cases in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and its Northwest Territories as hospitalizations across the country are on the rise.
As the European Parliament and Council this week reached an agreement to introduce a European Union digital COVID certificate to facilitate travel for Europeans in the EU, PAHO is maintaining that proof of vaccination should not be used as a standard for international travel. Director of Health Emergencies, Dr. Kyra Ugrate, explained that PAHO would not recommend countries moving forward with relaxing measures for those who have been vaccinated, as it could lead to discrimination as well as a rise in case numbers.
The WHO and PAHO do not recommend to change the entry requirements for the people who got vaccinated. And there are another aspect also, is how can we discriminate or separate the persons who have been vaccinated from the other ones that get vaccinated. And also, if you are, for example, in a community where some people got vaccinated, how can you identify those and let them, for example, reduce their protective measures?
While the vaccine does not protect against contracting COVID-19, he says relaxed measures could be dangerous for those who have yet to receive the jab.
It's clear that the vaccine does not protect from getting infected, although there are increased evidence that that is the case in a significant proportion of persons who get vaccinated. Still, there are many people that will still get infected, and by reducing the protective measures of the persons who get vaccinated, of course, there is an increased probability and risk of getting infected and passing the disease to others that have not get vaccinated yet.
According to officials, unless the majority of the population has been vaccinated, there is no need for relaxed restrictions.
There is a clear indication that unless the significant proportion of persons got fully vaccinated and protected, some of those protective measures must continue get in place, and there is no change in the restriction or reduction of the restriction for vaccinated people to get to international travel.
Still to come on our news, a story of surviving depression and how to deal with stress brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, plus why a current and former MP are slamming the recently extended emergency orders. That's coming up when our news returns.
Yes.
Jump in the
Barely.
Right there. Right there.
That is so funny.
Hey, you know what I'm saying? Now eyes up, just your eyes. Okay. Yes, got it. Like these hands in the pocket. 3, 2, 1. Eyes to the camera, guys.
Give Me Kingdom Season 2 coming soon to TV.
You're watching our news. Welcome back. As this month is Mental Health Awareness Month, we continue to share stories of those who have battled and overcome some form of mental illness. Tonight, our Kyle Joaquin brings us the story of Tanisha Longley, a woman who says that she overcame mental illness after 10 long years.
I had to go away and admit myself and get treated. So went away for a period, got treated, was on a psych ward for about 2 weeks, went back on meds, and the journey began all over again.
She's smiling now, but it's been a rough few years for Tanisha Longley. In 2010, she was diagnosed with major depressive disorder as well as anxiety disorder.
As a result, I was placed on medication, but I came off because no one told me that being on meds would usually get worse before it get better. And it got really worse, especially being suicidal. So I stopped the meds, and as a result, I started to try to deal with the situation and the sickness by myself. Growing up in church, being a woman of faith, you know, they tend to teach you to pray about everything. So for years, I suffered in silence.
And her story is similar to that of many dealing with depression on their own, unable to talk to anyone about it. Dealing with life on its own as well as miscarriages, the feeling led Tanisha to one point where she sat in her living room with a blade to wrist, prepared to end her life.
The only person who I spoke to at the time, which was my best friend, she was singing at at a church. So she wasn't there with me. So I was like, okay, this is my way out. Nobody knows. Wow. You know, and the moment I went to cut my wrist and just end it all, my phone rang. And when I looked down, it was my best friend. And she was at my gate. Wow. And she said she was on the pulpit. And in that moment, the Lord told her she had to come to me. And she left, just picked up her bag. Wow. Left church and came.
Tanisha said at that point she knew that God had her back. She checked herself into a facility in Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks. At that time, many family members and friends had no idea. Fast forward a few years later, and Tanisha is doing much better. Next month will make 1 year since she's been off of medication.
Moment by moment, something I learned in therapy was now, here, this. So basically in that moment we're saying we're now, it's now, we're here, and this is what is happening right here. Yeah. Nothing else. And that helps with the anxiety of keeping me grounded. So whenever I get to that place of being spiral, I just say, now, here, this.
Tanisha says she still has her moments, but she knows how to deal with it and how to talk to people. She says she longs for the day when mental health is taken much more serious, not just here in the Bahamas, but around the world. She said if there's anything, this is what keeps her going.
The fact that I can help someone else. That my life, my story can be an inspiration for someone else. That is what gives me joy. A lot of times we go through life and we ask the question, why me? But I've come to a place where I always say, why not me? You know, when we look at the life of Jesus, because I'm a woman of faith, I use him. He went through so many things, but none of it was for him. it was for everybody else.
Right.
You know, and that is how I see my life. I gave my life over to Christ, and I said, use me for your people.
For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Well, how well do you manage stress? It's a question the Doctors Hospital team is taking a closer look at, analyzing how many of us are managing stress in a COVID environment 1 year in. Experts say it's important for residents to recognize the telltale signs of stress. Part-time lecturer Nadia Cash says the taboo surrounding mental health in the Bahamas stems from ancestry.
Mental health is health, and a lot of people do not. A lot of the younger people who I deal with, they don't consider that. They consider mental health to be something completely separate and apart from their actual physical health. And as Dr. Hutchison said, for the variety of reasons, from the media, from people in our community stigmatizing it. And so the problem is that if they don't look at it, then they don't address it. And then we end up with a more dysfunctional society.
Studies taken after the second wave of the pandemic show that the largest stress factor is joblessness, according to Dr. Stephanie Hutchinson, who touched on the increasing number of layoffs as the Bahamas navigates how to safely reopen the economy and to welcome visitors.
We found out from those who we sampled that 1 in 4 adults are feeling quite stressed. So we all live with a degree of stress. But for this 1 in 4, and you think about those who we sampled, that's pretty significant in terms of people feeling an uptick, a serious uptick, a marked increase in the level of stress. And then, of course, you have that, like I said, overlaid with a steep rise in unemployment. People aren't working, so that you have basic survival needs are compromised.
Atlantis let go of 700 employees earlier this week. Hutchinson says it's important to look out for telltale signs of stress.
Rapidity of the changes and the adjustments and the restrictions and the lockdown, it's taken its toll. There are a lot of people who are more anxious. In terms of clinical practice, I've seen an uptick in those who are presenting with those issues related to sleep. So the changes that people have had to make and how rapidly they've had to make them and the struggle to keep up with them has really taken its toll over the last year. And like I said, the chronic nature of it, we've been at this for over a year.
Stress can even be manifested physically in your body.
We all go through some sort of stress at some level, and physically it could manifest itself in so many different ways. Like, for example, some people end up with tension headaches, some people end up with stomach aches, some people end up with ulcers, some people it gets so bad that it ends up breaking down their immune system and they end up with more serious diseases. And so stress is just one of those things that is a common denominator in all of our lives, especially considering, you know, our culture and something as simple as us being in a tropical climate and the heat.
Well, when our news comes back from the break, a former MP and a current MP weigh in on the extension of the emergency orders, and our Jillian Graves examines some unique cuisine over on Grand Bahama. That's coming up when our news returns.
Yes.
Jump in the truck.
Right there. Right there. That is so funny. Hey, you know what I'm saying? Now eyes up, just your eyes. Okay. Yes. Got it. Like these hands in the pocket. 3, 2, 1. 3, 6, 1. Eyes to the camera, guys.
Gimmy's Kingdom Season 2 coming soon to TV.
The government's decision to extend the state of emergency by 3 months is not sitting well with one former member of parliament who questions the real reason behind the extension.
These things that's happening in our country, I almost feel like they're a little bit small African republics, you know?
The state of emergency was due to expire May 23rd. However, the fourth proclamation was issued by the Governor General this week, giving the competent authority, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, up to another 6 months of emergency powers. That isn't sitting well with former Tall Pines MP Leslie Miller.
You got this one guy, the mighty ruler, comes out with these laws that impacts people's life in such a negative way. The funny thing is, while we're implementing these so-called orders, everybody, they're campaigning like hell, including the PM, all his ministers and MPs and everybody else in full election mode.
The Bahamas has remained under a state of emergency for 14 months, but according to Miller, the extension is yet another sign of an early election.
I suspect between now and August, we're going to certainly have election. So maybe that's why he said if it settles down in August, he'll call election. I think most people expect now that by August he'd be going to a general election. No one can sustain a pace like we've been going through over the last few months. You can't take it. The candidates can't take it. Even people get tired of saying you over and over and over again. No one starts election this early without going early.
A Free National Movement member of Parliament Frederick McAlpine says it's impossible for anyone to take the current state of emergency order seriously as the government party is continuing to campaign in the middle of a pandemic.
The problem is we've been in this state for more than 17 months, and it's been exhausting. It has affected us socially, economically, and psychologically. The question is, though, I don't know how people are taking the government serious with this when you tell us we're in a pandemic and we're still in a state of emergency and you're campaigning from door to door. Nobody's going to take the government serious until they act as if we're in a state of an emergency. Either we're in a state of an emergency or we're not. But you cannot say we're in a state of an emergency and you're campaigning in numbers and going at people's doors and knocking. And by doing that, you put people in a vulnerable position.
McAlpine's comments came after a resolution was passed in Parliament to extend the state of emergency to August 13th. The new state of emergency took effect last Friday. It gives the competent authority another 6 months of emergency powers. At this stage, the government is opting to extend for just 3 months. This is the fourth state of emergency since the start of the pandemic, and as the Bahamas is faced with a third wave of COVID-19 cases. Meanwhile, cases on Grand Bahama have sharply declined in recent weeks.
I don't contribute that to the government per se. I believe the numbers are lower because Grand Bahamians have taken what we call self-responsibility to take care of themselves and to follow the various protocol, putting a mask on our face, washing our hands, and sanitizing. Let me also state for the record that in Grand Bahama, where there's approximately 50,000+ persons, only 6,200 people have taken the vaccination. And up to the day of this time of this interview, only 300 have taken the second shot. So again, it's not because we're being vaccinated, it's because we're practicing the protocol, to which I believe that if the rest of the Bahamas or Nassau continues to do so, they too and various islands would be in a better position.
Well, when our news comes back from the break, we take a unique spin on conch salad. That's coming up when our news returns.
Yes.
Jump in the truck.
Right there. Right there. That is so funny. Sand. Now eyes up, just your eyes. Okay. Yes. Got it. Like these hands in the pocket. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Eyes in the camera, guys.
Give me Kingdom Season 2 coming soon to TV.
You're watching our news. Thanks for staying with us. Well, it's a unique take on a traditional dish. Pickled conch. Sherry and Sabo's conch stand in Grand Bahama has taken the conch salad dish and made it their own. In this edition of Grand Bahama in Focus, our Jillian Gray got a taste of what all the buzz is all about.
It's a legacy passed down through generations.
30, 40 years ago, my mother started on the conch wall. Started the conch salad, and
so you're the second generation?
I am. I'm the second generation of this, so I want to carry on my father's legacy.
Sherika Smith, better known as Sherry, says their stall has been a pillar in the West End community for generations.
We kept West End going by just making sure that everyone who comes down have that conch salad, and then we added something special to our menu, which is the pickled conch salad.
She now holds their secret family recipe for pickled conch close to her heart. Smith says she never thought the unique take on conch salad would become as popular as it is now.
We started out putting it in the pickled saltwater water, but we wanted to be, unique. We wanted to do it, a special way. And for somehow God just allowed me to just put things together and bam.
Now you have your own brand.
Own brand. Shovels and Sherry's Pickled Conch.
The pickled conch salad is made with fresh herbs and vegetables similar to traditional conch salad. It's also sold as a tropical salad. Now it's time to taste.
How is it?
It's great. I really like it. Hurricane Dorian left their stall in pieces, but Smith counts herself as resilient and says nothing will stop the legacy of Sherry and Shabo's conch stand.
West End is a resilient, especially I am. When you look me down, and I've learned how to stand up and fight, even in the toughest times. Yeah, so I got to keep on going.
Reporting for Our News Weekend, I'm Jillian Gray.
Well, thank you for joining us for Our News. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Georgia Bain, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow night. Have a beautiful evening, Bahamas.